Welcome, everyone, to the School of Block podcast. We've got a very special episode today. We've got Eric Faust from Block Assets, also the host of the Crypto Coffee podcast. And we're here to discuss today a few things about the industry, as well as what Block Assets can offer the ICO community. So welcome to the show, Eric.
Yeah, hey Adam, thanks for having me. Obviously, excited to be here. You were on my show over a month ago now, and appreciate you having you on there, and so appreciate being here today.
Absolutely. So let's jump right into the good stuff. Tell us a little bit about how you got into the crypto industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a great question, Adam. I think for me, it really came down to, back in 2012 when the Zeitgeist was a popular film, Occupy Wall Street was going on. And I was in college, so I was full of all sorts of altruistic ideas. So I got into the space way back then, just really sort of inspired by this idea of recreating a financial system. Started mining Bitcoin out of my college dorm, so to speak, and got excited, fell in love a little bit with crypto back then. A few years later, it was sort of fizzling out. Bitcoin was at $100. It didn't seem like it was this revolutionary thing that I thought it was at the time. So was in another sort of corporate career back then. About a year ago, a lot of some, I guess I'd say, investments now in the blockchain space started to really pick up. Bitcoin I had mined in my dorm out of 2012 all of a sudden was worth a pretty penny, and it started to seem like this whole industry was picking up. A lot of the conversations we had back in 2012, when adoption would occur, what it would look like, a lot of it really looked and felt like that was starting to happen. So essentially, I just jumped off the cliff from there and said, all right, I'm going to find a way for myself and try to build a company in this space. And that's how Block Assets was born. Essentially, I come from an e-commerce background, so for me, it was just trying to understand, how the same old thing of transactions was going to translate into the blockchain space, how I could apply some of the same things we had learned in the e-commerce world into crypto. So I think that was kind of what inspired me to get into it initially. And then what really made me take the jump, I think, was adoption and just seeing what some of my friends in San Francisco and abroad were really doing. So I think that's what inspired me to get into the space. I don't think it's what anybody would expect entering a new space. I think this has been one of the most interesting experiences of my life. I don't know about you, Adam, but the ups and downs of the market, the fast and furious pace, it's really unlike anything else that I've been in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I could speak to that even a little bit on how you initially kind of find it in 2012 with a peak in curiosity and a little bit of nerdery, if you will. I kind of had the same gut feeling as well. But then, of course, as the sideways market continued to be as volatile as it is, but back in those times, it was much lower pricing. And, I also myself branched out into the corporate world and did some jobs for a few companies, all the while trying to revive or at least hold on to the initial projects in the crypto space that I had done. So I'm definitely with you on that, and definitely understand kind of what that feels like as well. So that's pretty interesting path there. So then let us kind of move into Block Assets. So you have a pretty good background of sort of curiosity killed the cat, mining some crypto in 2012, and then how does Block Assets form?
Yeah, absolutely. So another great question. So Block Assets is really born out of, we were doing some pretty basic rudimentary community development for a variety of different ICOs pre-2018. We started to see a lot of gaps in how people were fundraising, we could see the maturation of the market just towards the end of 2017, when I come from a bit of a VC space. I worked in the venture capital space for about a year out of 2015. So, 2016, VCs wouldn't even touch. They wouldn't even understand what a crypto project meant. When ICOs were sort of first coming out. 2017, they didn't care until about June. All of a sudden in June, they started to get inundated with a whole bunch of old contacts getting in touch with me, knowing a little bit about my history and experience in the space. And so all of a sudden we started to see all these VCs start to get interested in, blockchain and ICOs and getting in early in private sales and buying big. So we thought, okay, adoption must be coming. So we set out, we started to build essentially a contribution portal. Some of the projects we had worked on had a lot of issues with the software behind the actual contribution itself, from whether it's tracking, whether it's doing proper KYC, AML, and compliance, which I don't think a lot of people in the ICO space really understand what that even means.
Yep.
We essentially create a piece of software. We come from an e-commerce background, so we know a lot about compliance, a lot about the regulatory guidelines. I look at what's happened in crypto, similar to what happened in e-commerce eons ago, where at first there was this big splash. Everybody was just trying to sell things online. A lot of internet scams got drummed up. It lost a lot of luster. People were scared to put their credit cards online. And until a compliant, the PayPals of the world really emerged, right, this was a huge hurdle. So essentially we took the concept of how can we create a platform that an ICO could simply deploy their contribution portal off of. We have some support built in, some other fun stuff, help them essentially go off and have a successful raise and help write a smart contract, etc. There's quite a few other companies in the space that do this. So I think what our secret sauce is, or what makes us unique, is just to connect to the capital. We almost try to act like a mini investment bank, where on one side we're going to engage the ICO or the company trying to fundraise. On the other side of the coin, we're going to engage sort of our network of investors, hedge funds, private equity, etc. And then we're going to engage them with your project. So I think that's a little bit of our secret sauce. But simply put, we're a contribution portal piece of software. So if you're looking to launch an ICO, we streamline a lot of the processes, and I've been there and around the block before.
Very interesting. So that's great. Just from an offering perspective, helping to propel the industry along. I think one of the best opportunities that presents itself in any niche inside cryptocurrency happens to be where people do things incorrectly. So kudos to jumping on, standardizing, or at least attempting to formalize in a nice process how companies can leverage the ICO. So that's pretty interesting. So let me ask you, sort of off topic with my question set here, but in line with what we just spoke about. Have you had any people approach you, looking to do an ICO, looking to do a token-based raise, but in conjunction with a traditional securities product like an ICO, like issuing shares? Are there any hybrids that may be making themselves present in the industry? Because I always thought that, prior to the episode that I was on your podcast, we talked a lot about consolidation occurring after, regulatory effect coming into play. And it almost seems like there's a large portion of things with respect to crypto that you can't escape for the traditional, finance realms. And really it just circles around the law. So is there any interest on that? I've always been curious as to seeing kind of a hybrid model take advantage of both. I just thought I might throw that out there, see if there was any appetite for something like that.
Yeah, it's a tough question right now, because all the financial industry folks are really excited about this term, security token offering, STO, asset-backed tokens, debt-backed tokens. They just see it as a way that, the share is naturally evolving, the share is turning into a token, instead of doing an offering where you'd essentially go to an IPO. There's a much more streamlined path that we can create a security token offering. There's been a lot of people talking about that, about how we can actually innovate the financial industry through tokenization. Right. So I almost think they're two different conversations. One is how to create security-backed tokens. I think there's a pathway currently, but not many people are taking it. The people that I know that are taking it aren't having tremendous amounts of success. Right. I think what led the ICO appetite in this, and I think people are going to get almost forced into a hybrid type of model that you mentioned, where I think the ICO is like the minimum viable product. but en masse for like this new type of technology where this is how we create a unit of value. This is how it's digitally exchanged. And finally then, okay, what's it backed by?
Right.
And if it's backed by something, then we know in our traditional world there's a security. So I feel like it's going to be forced into some sort of hybrid approach, because I don't think you can just say to a company, okay, great, do a Reg D, raise the private investors. I think the whole ICO model, the point of the ICO model was to break that.
Right.
The whole point of the ICO was to say, we want retail investment from a crowd, and sure, we'll give a bigger bonus to people who want to put in more capital, but that doesn't even necessarily mean you're an accredited investor. So what are we trying to do here? So I think it's the language that's killing people right now. Around these type of offerings. I think the next wave, what we saw was the first wave of crypto was ICOs work, but there's a lot of fraud and there's zero regulation in the space. So people are just coming in and taking advantage of people, capitalizing on hype, etc. I see a lot of opportunity for people who are committed not just to doing it the right way, also working with regulators, but three, really trying to push the boundaries a little bit. What I learned in e-commerce was you're gonna break some rules, but if you have someone you can go work with on those rules, who's the regulator, you're gonna help build them together.
Right.
But if you're just gonna break the rules and can repeatedly break them and be like, come get me, they're gonna eventually come get you. We saw that a lot in e-commerce, in the affiliate marketing world, and with people processing, bad types of transactions, etc. So I think what we're going to see in crypto is the same type of regulation. All essentially at the end of the day, regulators want is to make sure scams, frauds aren't occurring, and there isn't basically people doing mass market manipulation. I think all those things have occurred in crypto at this point in time.
Absolutely.
But what does an ICO look like in 2020 when the rush comes back? Do you go and get a Reg A plus or Reg D offering to do your I don't know, maybe you do. But for me, there's a lot more capital that wants to go into anything called a security token. You go talk to private equity, hedge funds, you go talk to angel cap investors. All they want is an investment that they can hedge against, security hedge against. A coin or a token traded on an exchange. There's no hedging. You can't bet against yourself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So because of that, I see a huge demand for the next wave being security tokens. But there's got to be an easier path than you need to pay the SEC $500K, liaise with us for 6 months before you can launch your offering. I just feel like that's
a broken process for sure.
Yeah.
So one thing, on that note, I kind of thought it was interesting that it seems like a big problem in the ICO space is that once it hits the masses is when you have this serious concern for any type of regulatory compliance regarding offering securities, et cetera. But what about the private pre-placement private segment of doing a capital raise before an ICO? Might it not fit in that hybrid space where you can use the mechanism of what the ICO can provide in order to raise the capital? And then at least that way, by the time the company has to, go through the traditional process with the SEC or whatever that may look like, post ICOs coming into the norm, it seems like a lot of the high net worth institutional people who participated in the earlier ICOs were okay with doing such things on the basis that, this is sort of the first phase of where this project or company is going. And this first phase is simply using an alternative capital raising mechanism. So then my thought is simply, couldn't an ICO post its pre-sale and post its raising, on the blockchain actually then redefine itself or convert itself into a traditional type of offering? What are your thoughts on that, on sort of the accredited side being able to use the technology, and then that eliminates, a high level of protection-based regulation on the masses side when the actual offering is public per se?
Yeah, no, I think that's what's happening literally as we speak right now. We talk to a lot of ICOs every week, we're really choosy with who we work with. It really needs to be the right fit for both product and investor base. So because of that, we've seen this massive adoption of private accredited investors, institutional cap wanting to come in, wanting to come in big. So here's the problem that we saw with institutional cap over the last year. So we saw a few ICOs where they'd go out, they'd raise 10, 20 million, but they'd give a huge bonus or an award. In the traditional stock arena, it's called an award. In the crypto world, for some reason, we decided we're going to call it a bonus. Right. But essentially, you're going to maybe double your money or 1.5x your money. We're going to do 50% bonus, 100% bonus. Day one on the market, the private cap investors are the ones that you see the red drop. You know, it's almost insidious because they came in with a huge amount of cap and then they're slashing your coin out on day one. So I think that's why people like this security token mechanism, because even a private cap buyer who'd come into a Reg D or Reg A plus offering, they'd be forced to hold the coin or token for at least a year. Right. So because of that, there's a little bit more value in your investment. Where I think the opportunity is right now to get capital, and if you're doing an ICO or an STO, is through institutional cap. I think the sort of crowd investor mentality is really gone. It rises, and we've seen this before, rises and falls with the mania or the hype behind cryptocurrency. I guarantee the next run, the next big bull run that happens, we're going to see a huge influx of people wanting to participate in ICOs. The problem with ICOs, it's almost gambling. You're going to throw some money, you're going to get a utility token that you probably don't have any concept of using, right, and then you want to sell this token at a later time for more money. That's more of a security type of mindset than a utility token type of mindset. So I think that, so twofold. One, institutional cap and private investors is how blockchain companies are raising money, whether it's through an ICO or an STO, either or, that's how they're raising cap today. But what I do see returning is the crowd the next time crypto goes on a run, or if it does. I think the market's really in crypto trend to when things are going good, everybody's money's moving quickly. When things are bad, I mean, I'm getting emails on my phone that's like, are we in an ICO ice age? So I think right now, if you're raising capital as an ICO, if I was in somebody's shoes, I'd say chase private cap, chase institutional cap. Aim to educate, don't just try to get a check. There's lots of money to be raised right now. There's lots of excitement in this space. So take advantage of it, just like the people over the last year took advantage of the retail crowd.
Absolutely. So it seems like, you're doing great things for the industry. You're tackling definitely a problem that needs solving, and will definitely help sort of coax this process forward in a much better light and good light, given some of the negativity that ICOs have managed to generate for themselves. It's very impressive what you guys are doing over at Block Assets. So as a community participant, I'd just like to say, kudos to that. Excellent on kind of killing two birds with one stone, one of them being, what you guys are solving itself. And then, the educational aspect of just, look, people, this is how things have to be done properly is something that the industry will continue to need tons of as the decade comes by.
There's an appetite for it finally. I think the Wild West, which was a lot of fun, the Wild West of crypto was an awesome ride, is slowing down. There are rules and regs coming. I just feel like everybody who's in this space is evolving so rapidly that it's just get in and hold on for dear life.
Yeah, no, I agree. I actually wanted to wear my Just Hodl It shirt with the Nike check with the bar graphs, but unfortunately, it wasn't clean enough for today's episode. So let's kind of jump into sort of the next piece, which is kind of touching on my last comment there. Tell us a little bit about why you have Crypto Coffee going and the purpose of that, because it seems like that's sort of the accompanying complementary piece on the educational side as to make people aware. And now we're at a time where at least 80% of the general public in North America knows what Bitcoin is. And when I say knows what Bitcoin is, I think more they've heard of it than knowing what it is. But at least that is a huge milestone for where we are. So let's talk about crypto coffee and how that came about.
Yeah, absolutely. About, I think it was like 4 months ago, this negative narrative, just after April, early June, I think everyone started to realize that projects weren't coming through that raised a lot of money and founders were disappearing. And was this just a cash grab? And what I noticed about crypto, it's really interesting, it came out of a decentralized, anonymous type of mentality. If you look at like crypto Twitter, it's a bunch of people who have like tied their crypto name to some sort of, crypto dog, or, there's all these people who are anonymous and are just hiding behind some sort of mask in the space. Now, as like in sort of some sort of trading environment, where people are traders, I think that's sort of this cool underbelly of the crypto world that we have. Mm-hmm. What crypto really needs, and I think there's a lack of these people, the people who want to be sort of the first wave of crypto, who are going to be the crazy people who are like talking about it, hosting shows, getting other people who are interested about it together. So really crypto coffee was a way to try to legitimize like who is actually in the space, like who's raising money, what are they doing, like do these people care at all, like is this just some sort of maniacal twisted industry that's been spun up off of the digital age, or are there people that really care, they're really trying to make a difference and really trying to leverage this technology forward? So it really is more so trying to find who are the people that for the next decade are going to be putting in the work into crypto. These people should show up now, start talking about it, get in the conversation now. So as things evolve and as things change, they're there, and we're not paying attention to people who are anonymous. And I think there's a lot of value to being anonymous online and a lot of value for your privacy. But I think at the same time, every industry needs a group of people to stand up and say, like, I'm the face, I'll be the face of it. Like, let's walk this walk together. And, you see, I think it was Jimmy Song or Roger Ver had a debate this week, and like that blows up and everyone's talking about it. And more people need to be having more of these types of tough conversations about blockchain and cryptocurrency. So it legitimizes the space. So people feel like there are real people in this space. There are people who are innovating and making a difference, and not just a bunch of people who I think it attracted this unsavory crowd of people who are looking to make a quick buck. So, it's a little bit of weeding out people who are here for unsavory practice, and mainly do that just through a bunch of vetting questions they ask before the show. And then once we get people on the show, really try to do a good job of vetting them and making sure that there's someone in the industry who's trying to move this thing forward, and not just take a quick buck wherever they can.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I couldn't agree more with respect to sort of putting a face on it and a lot of the mystery behind the pseudonyms that plague the subreddits where most of us get our information from on any particular topic in crypto. So I'm fully in agreement with that. And then also from another perspective, it's important for the masses who are trying to bring into this fold to be able to understand the difference between those pseudonymous people and, guys like us who actually attach some type of ideological principle that's in line with what we believe in our everyday lives to what this technology and the purpose of what this tech can do for the future. So I think that's brilliant, and I think we just need more of that. We have the same goal over here at School of Block on this podcast. It's just simply educational. We got to get that 80% figure higher until it's 100, and then obviously have the understanding go deeper than any of the misconceptions that the traditional masses usually have about Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, what I've noticed about investment in the space as well is that there are a lot of people post December, January of this year whose appetite has either diminished or they lost or et cetera. But that doesn't change the investment principle of backing people that you believe in. And I think that there are a lot of very talented and capable people who have sort of pivoted into or moved into the space that gives it a second chance on that front, because maybe that's not the end all be all factor is whether or not you believe in Bitcoin per se or Ethereum per se. But, if you believe in a group of people who kind of identifies a problem that can be solved and executes at a high level, we're just going to see more and more of that, I believe, as people get very passionate about the space and more education continues to make people understand. So that's excellent on that front.
It's a great point. And I'll add one more thing, which I'm reading this book right now. It's a bit of an oldie. It's called Inside the Tornado, book by Jeffrey Moore. He also wrote Crossing the Chasm, which I think is a book that every entrepreneur has heard of or read from the good old Silicon Valley days. But this book, Inside the Tornado, it talks about this idea that when new technology emerges, nobody really even understands what it's going to do at first. Like if you go back, I always tell people this, go back and look at Bill Gates talk about the internet in 1996 on Letterman.
Right.
And you will laugh because they're basically making fun of it. They're making fun of Bill Gates on national television.
Right.
And that's going to be this big thing. And Microsoft's this internet giant. What does that mean? So it's what seems laughable now, which is, so this technology, people understand it at a very rudimentary level, at a very base level. But in order to get it to the next level, we need people talking about it. We need people using it. And I think the next big step that we're waiting on is applications that leverage blockchain, that leverage this, essentially technology you can trust, permissionless database. So because of that, we're watching evolution. We don't know, we're like humans, we don't really know what to do with it yet. But I think these next few years, as we start to figure it out, are going to be super lucrative. So the more people hear about it, the more people get the blockchain bug or the crypto bug, the more it continues to spread. And I think the people that you don't want to forget about when we're talking about blockchain, because it really is opening the gates to many different financial industries. Is I always tell a story. I was driving through Belize, and Belize is like third world country essentially. So I'm driving through like the mountains and this very rural area, and every 5-10K there's a village there, and there's like 15 houses in the middle of nowhere. There's people standing on the side of the street, and they're like selling honey. So all day they just sit there, wait for tourists or somebody to go by and give them like $2 for like a big thing of honey. But while they're sitting there selling honey for $2, they're sitting there on their phone. And I always thought that, this is someone who odds are doesn't have a bank account, but has access to the internet. So if globalization is almost skipping a lot of steps for a lot of people, how can blockchain be effective, not just for a small group of people sort of in the first world, but there's a whole bunch of other people, talk about microtransactions, et cetera, that have this massive opportunity to be able to bring them into this global market. So I think it's very important that people talk about it. I also think it's very important that, pick up a book, listen to a few more podcasts, et cetera, just dig in, because once you start down this path, I think you hit a certain point and then it's like, oh my God, this is exciting.
This is exciting. This is disruptive. This is bigger than I ever thought. No, that's a brilliant point. It kind of reminds me of a documentary I watched a few years ago about the CERN particle accelerator. And in one of these conferences that somebody was giving, a question was asked, does anybody know what the financial gain for the particle accelerator and smashing subatomic atoms together is going to do for us? And it was very interesting. And the host bluntly said, I have no idea. And it kind of brings it back to that point. I mean, when radio waves were discovered, they weren't called radio waves because we didn't have radios. And we didn't know that a piece of technology like a radio would be able to leverage signals in science and in physics in order to share information across wavelengths. And so I thought it was very interesting that you drew that comparison, because some of the biggest technological advances in our world that have come about in its initial stages it's just not even known how you could describe it, because, you know, as most of us say, you're literally opening Pandora's box, and that reference is simply to suggest infinite possibility,
Yeah.
and infinite continuation. So that was a great analogy to make to that, as I've heard it before in another completely separate industry as well.
Totally.
So, so let's talk about a couple of more current things. I thought we, you know, maybe just briefly touch on a few topics as we kind of skated into, you know, one of them being regulation, and then obviously a subcategory of that would be manipulation. So, you know, given the current bloodbath that's kind of presenting itself in the market at this current moment, where do you see, let's say, timeline-wise, we're kind of going with this? It seems like we're getting nearer and nearer to most things coming into effect, and I'm wondering if this is just the last-ditch efforts of the manipulators to take advantage of, you know, quote unquote, the Wild West, as you had mentioned, because those days will be coming to an end at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that the current state of things is it's everybody I've talked to in crypto, everyone's just holding on right now. It's another bear market. I think we've seen this before, out of 2015, et cetera. So in terms of in regulation, we were looking at putting an exchange together months back now, and we were talking, essentially what we did, we're just like, let's just go talk to regulators. And regulators aren't scary people, so I've talked to quite a few people about this, which is, if you're doing an offering, going and telling, this isn't the same as, you know, something where you can ask for forgiveness once you've done it. I think that's one thing in the ICO space, definitely be wary of with regulators. Don't just ask for forgiveness later and be like,
Right.
oh, I didn't know after I went through with this whole offering.
Right. I didn't know after creating my own security and raising several $100 million wasn't allowed.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I created something. Yeah, so I think that's a dangerous path to go down. I think if you're dabbling in crypto, it's fine to, you know, not go approach the SEC. But if you want to launch an offering, if you're trying to do things above board, just like I continually compare it to e-commerce. I see so many parallels, which is, you just go talk to a regulator. If you go talk to people whose job it is to do this, and say like, hey, we want to comply to the best of our ability. We will follow your guidelines. We'll submit whatever documents you want, and we'll keep you apprised of everything we're doing. And when we finish our compliance book for this offering, I'm going to give it to you. You can look it over, you know, red line, any changes, etc. But we're happy to work with you. You approach a regulator like that, they'll probably say, fantastic, let's liaise. And then when something's wrong, the regulator is going to come to you and say, let's work on fixing this, not, I'm going to put you in an orange jumpsuit because you're some sort of horrible person.
Right.
You got to approach this just like we're humans, and humans need to communicate. When we don't communicate, things go fucking way off kilter. So what you want to do with if you're thinking about doing an offering, is just communicate with the regulator. If you're doing a Reg D or a Reg A Plus offering, go to, and you're in the United States, go to the SEC. Like, what are you afraid of? Them saying, no, this is illegal, then don't do it. Like, you can practice not doing things. But if they're saying, hey, look, we like what you're doing, but you need to tweak these 6 or 7 things, wouldn't it be great to know before rather than after? So I think that's where the opportunity is. If you're a project in the space, you got to go to the regulators and talk to them. I mean, every project, one of the big follies I see is projects leaving to go somewhere else to launch their ICO.
Right.
I understand why people do it right now. It's because there's nobody in North America willing to play ball. But I think you'd be very surprised that if you went to talk to a regulator, what they'd be willing to work with you on, rather than try to work against you. So I think everyone thinks they're working against you, not for you. So if you're in a coin offering space, highly recommend just go speak with regulators before you get started. That's all they've asked. You're just basically meeting the due diligence requirements that they ask. So when things change, they come to you with a change request, not anything, you know, a little bit more scary. So on one sense, I think it's just important to talk to regulators. And I think the one thing the regulators will do in the next few years is come up with a framework for these types of offerings that everyone's going to hate. It's going to be this wrestling match going back and forth for a while,
Right.
with people going to Malta if they don't fit. That's what they're trying to do right now, right? They're saying, here's the sandbox, play within it. And some of the things in that sandbox might be really hard for you to meet. And if I just go to Singapore, if I just go to Malta, I can do this without having to go through those hurdles. So in one sense, I think it's really important that you talk to regulators, but in the other sense, if your project doesn't fit, then there is a multitude of other places you can go and do these types of things in and protect yourself, and really lead with a strong foot forward rather than trying to figure out, am I this or am I that? If you don't clearly fit in a box, then there's way better opportunities. And I think we've seen companies go to Estonia, Malta, Bermuda, Cayman, etc., to be able to do these types of offerings. On the market manipulation side, that's something that I'd be much more concerned of, because I remember those 50,000 person Discord groups doing pump and dumps and all that type of stuff. I think that stuff is where there's more danger and where it becomes more casino-esque rather than investment. So I think regulators should be less concerned about offerings that don't get to an exchange. So there's a lot of projects out there that are going to try to raise money, especially if they go through Reg A plus or Reg B. I think there's a lot of value to just being able to have a process that those people follow through. Once they get on an exchange, that's where the most concerning data and information I think is leaking out now, where markets are getting manipulated, or it kind of looks like they are. There's nobody looking under. So I'm sure if there's nobody looking, there's got to be someone taking advantage of it, right? Just human nature is to explore and exploit. So I think regulations can't come soon enough for market manipulation. I know it's one thing that everyone's trying to understand right now. I've even heard the term market makers, which in the old IPO world is basically stock stabilizers. So some of the people who are in the financial world are coming in with ideas around, how do I stabilize a coin once I launch it on an exchange? So that's good. What's bad is the people that currently, hold a bunch, dump it, and then rebuy at a lower price because they just cut everybody off at the ankle. So I think that's the bigger concern for me, is how do we stop market manipulation? I think regulators are trying to figure out how they can create paths for ICOs and STOs, but market manipulation by far has to be. I mean, if you look at a regulated job, it's so big. Like, to even look at crypto in its infancy right now, like, they don't have time for that. They're trying to catch the guys on Wall Street who are doing insider trading, et cetera. So that's where crypto's still small enough that people can get away with it. But the sooner that they are not able to get away with it, I think the more success long-term the industry is going to have, because it's going to add a stabilizing sort of force in our space, which is desperately needed.
Yeah, no, that's some very interesting points. I mean, I think it's also been a traditional human nature misconception, if you will, that regulators are so scary. And it's very interesting to see in the time that we are now, 2018, post high-speed internet, post, revolutionary technologies, that, a lot of the manpower inside of these regulatory bodies prefer to take a proactive approach instead of the opposite approach. And that is something that, I got to give kudos to, what our governments are trying to not do, which is to, squelch the growth of something as big as blockchain. So that's a very interesting point. And then on the manipulation side, I would also totally agree. And I also think it's very interesting when you see, Goldman Sachs make an announcement about X having to do with crypto. And then, maybe 6 weeks later, they go, yeah, that, we're delaying it, or we're, that was a false article somebody reported. And with respect to this sort of manipulation game, it seems like there's a lot of players in Wall Street with clout, and the finance space with clout, that that their opinions are worth a lot. almost in the same sense when, somebody like a George Soros tweets about a company's stock and it could move the price. I mean, that type of power is only wielded by a few, and I think that's heavily being taken advantage of by those entities in the space, and it's kind of giving it a bad name. It's causing a lot of sideways action in the market for sure.
Yeah, the amount of news and media that affects crypto, and for just coming from a community developer's point in the ICO space, the ability to both control what your message is and then, have partners, et cetera, and be able to create a narrative or create a story around your project. I mean, it's crazy what that effect has to both raise capital, but also to drive your price up, down, all the way around. It's been incredible to watch how narrow the community is in regards to there's not that much media out there, that there's not that much news. Everyone's getting their information from a few different places. So when Goldman Sachs announces anything, you can just almost correlate it to the price. For me, it's fascinating to watch that this social almost organism's impact on market price. So how is that going to continue to stay the same? I think it's always really been there, but in crypto, because there really isn't that many reputable news outlets, you know what I mean? And there's certainly no left and right. What would the left and right politically in the crypto space be, like Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash? I don't even know. I think it's a way bigger spectrum than that.
I would agree.
So it's an interesting sort of thing everyone I think is wrestling with at this point in time. But like with anything like this, that type of problem gives other people opportunity. There is ways to take advantage of it. There is ways to exploit it, especially if you're raising capital. But at the same time, I think we need a little bit more stability in the market, not to have quite the impact. Like Bitcoin ETF gets, 12 of them got rejected. Bitcoin price, boom. It's like, wow, really is just causing an effect right now. So until that starts to move a little bit, or we move into another sort of mania type phase where everything starts to run green, I think both of those things are equally as dangerous. But we need to figure out stability. I still think we're a long way from it. I still think crypto is this natural thing that nobody really truly understands yet. But I think it's up to people right now to try a lot of things, make a lot of mistakes, fail big, because it's a new space. And if you could go back and it's 2000 and e-commerce was just starting off and social media wasn't even a thing yet, can you imagine the amount of business ideas and opportunities that you could see for yourself between 2000 and 2015? It's crazy. I think we're doing the same thing. We're just in like year 2 or 3 of the same thing, only different happening.
Interesting, very interesting. So one of the last things I guess we'll want to touch on, sort of industry related, kind of directly affects us on more of a local level, being in Canada, the home of Ethereum. So what do you think about how the NAFTA negotiations between Canada and the US are affecting the price of the crypto markets? Do you think there's any bearing there?
I think if anything, it's less of a bearing on direct cause and effect. It's not so much like news impacts markets. Where that stuff, I think, sort of subconsciously underlies a bigger role is this fear and scarcity type of mentality that I think's emerged in the last 6 months in crypto for sure. But I think people need reasons to care about blockchain, and they need reasons to care about, like, I need to be able to feed my family so I can care about some side project or hobby that might turn into a business in the future. So because of that, I think as a Canadian, you hear like NAFTA, our trade agreement with like our biggest partner that's right next door. We've always had a great relationship. What's going on? I think as sort of a Canadian, it puts you in a bit of a fear mentality. They're almost like our bigger brother that we thought we'd just always get along with. Right. I think this is just like the occasional spat. I don't know if it has any direct cause and effect, but I think if anything, like anything else, when you need to worry about, safety and security and what happens if things dramatically shift? You stop caring about how can I create this next great business? How can I build, great partner relationships and know that it's going to stay above board? I think that's some of the more cause effect that I see. It just has more of effect on the way people conduct, the way people do business. But at the same time, I don't know if there's any direct impact. I think if anything, the best part of crypto is borderless. You just try. I always do this whenever I send a wire, and I sit there for like 30 minutes. I'm like going over with the teller, like, are those the right numbers? Like, I think these are the right numbers. Yeah. And then I go send a BTC transaction, ETH transaction, and like I can literally see when I sent it, when it got there, the blocks in between. And I'm like, I don't know why this isn't just how I move money today, but this seems easier and just $25 every time I want to do it. Which would I rather use? So I don't know if NAFTA is directly affecting price, but I do think it's just more fear, more I don't want to say negative, but more like withdrawing emotions. And I think just on a human level, people, when things go boom, people spend a lot of time working on what the future could be like. When things get scarce and there's fear in the market, which I think crypto is rife with right now, people aren't investing, everything slows down. We almost grind to a halt because you're like, you're frozen in the headlights. Right. That's what's happening. But I don't know, like, what's your thoughts on NAFTA and how it could be affecting?
I kind of similarly agree. I would say that it's very interesting to see that traditional capital investment, in the last year and a half has skyrocketed regardless of industry itself. And so obviously something like NAFTA does create that lack of optimism, that fear. But it just seems like there's an additional metric with respect to Ethereum. So I haven't really gone into any type of deep analysis, but when I look at the US dollar is really what we peg Bitcoin at as far as determining its value. And everything else is kind of pegged at Bitcoin's price, that the US dollar and US economy does have a strong correlative effect on the crypto markets in general. And then, so with respect to the Canadian angle and Ethereum, I'm wondering if Ethereum's drop in price is solely correlated to the pegged cryptocurrency, the standard Bitcoin, or if there are other metrics that are obviously affecting that above and beyond what's happening traditionally in the market. And that's kind of what I think is that. That is playing into it a little bit, but, I haven't gone deep enough into an analysis. It's more of a thought and an opinion on, how that potentially affects us, because even if Ethereum, is pegged at Bitcoin and Bitcoin's pegged at the US dollar, and traditional ETH prices are also shown in US dollar to get, whatever type of general index price for Ether you can, and then where Ether is created and maintained and worked on and developed, and it's in a NAFTA zone, and then there's issues with the NAFTA agreement. I mean, I think it'll get resolved, but I was just kind of interested to see if maybe, because that is having a pretty big economic impact signal-wise on the markets, that it may actually fall over into ETH, and just ETH specifically on that question. More so, I don't think it would damage the US per se to not have a new NAFTA agreement the way it would damage Canada. And then when you compare Bitcoin and ETH, it's like I put Bitcoin in the US category and I put ETH in the Canadian category. So that's kind of just my take on that.
Well, what I think is fascinating about Ether is, since the last time, it was probably around when people started referring to the flippening happening.
The flippening.
Right? Remember the flippening? Ether was going to be worth more than Bitcoin.
Right.
I remember it was about to happen, and then that didn't happen. But what did happen was ETH traced Bitcoin almost for like a year.
Yeah.
And I think it's just this last few drops in price, last about 3 months. That's correlation has completely gone away. It's dropping, BTC is stable. So it's interesting to see that what that stems from. I think a lot of
Hard to gauge.
a lot of bad projects, and probably a lot of ether not moving around.
Right.
Because is one idea that I have, but I think it's kind of fascinating. It's the first time it's stopped. Why is it stopped? What's causing this? I think although that's yet to be determined, it'd be something fascinating to try and figure out, which is why isn't it tracing anymore when it traced for probably close to a year? The price of Bitcoin in some form of ratio. So that would be my take on it, which is nobody seems to have a decent answer as to why ETH is having such a spectacular fall right now.
Yeah, it's certainly a tough one to try to identify, and maybe Ethereum itself as a project has crossed the threshold in some respects as to what we were talking about the flipping, more on the usability and utility side of things, but that doesn't ever always necessarily equate to a rise in price, right? So the more people that come on board with anything, potentially, if dilution is involved, then you can make the case that you're spreading it thin, and so then why would it go up if it's used very specifically? And yeah, it's just very interesting conversation to have about what the bloodbath and the markets are looking like, because then you look at what's pegged to ETH more than it's pegged to Bitcoin on the rest of the token side, and then there's a whole other way to analyze that the rest of the market may not necessarily continue to trace the way it did with the standard asset of Bitcoin. Very, very interesting conversation.
How many ERC20 tokens need to die before that starts to negatively affect Ethereum's price? That already happened. I don't know, but I think that the fact that so many problem projects were launched off of Ethereum, it's bound to come back to haunt them later. And I don't know if that's happening right now, but it's certainly in the process of happening, I think. So will Ethereum struggle because bad projects were launched through smart contracts on their platform? I don't know, but it must have some sort of cause and effect with the way the market's reacted, all things considered. The good news is Bitcoin continues to hold, and it's like by the blood is always when people talk about this stuff, it's like, man, I remember this in 2015 and everyone's like, well, crypto's over, it's a big joke.
Yep.
It's almost like whatever MSNBC is saying, just almost always do the opposite. Ripple $3, here's how to buy it. It's almost like now would be a great time to sell it. I just find that correlation has had like some very funny things.
That statement, by the way, is correct more than just for crypto news, by the way.
Yeah, totally. If you just look at the opposite, you're like, all right, I'm gonna contrarian this.
No, so that was great, Eric. Just as we wrap up, where can people find you, whether it's for Crypto Coffee or they have interest in doing ICO projects? Just give us a little way to get in touch with you and some final words.
Yeah, absolutely. So the best way to get a hold of me is through our website, block-assets.com. There you'll be able to find all sorts of fun stuff about our ICO portal. Crypto Coffee is up there, so you can take a perusal through that. And take another look at their podcast with Adam and I in it. So block-assets.com is the best place to find me. There's a contact us form, so if you want to get a hold of me, just shoot me a message in there. And I'm always on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active over there. And if you send me a connect request, I'll include a little message in it, and I'll be sure to accept it.
Excellent. Well, Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us today. Very interesting conversation. Just in general, other than for the reason of making a podcast, we love having these conversations. So, that was very excellent. And I'm glad our listeners will get a chance to have some new insights, both about what you're doing in the space and our opinions on what's going on in the industry. So thanks again for joining us, Eric.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate it. Obviously, love what you guys over at BitBuy are doing. So if you guys aren't familiar with what Adam's doing, please go check out BitBuy, because it's a very easy on and off ramp for crypto. So Adam, appreciate you having me on, and I'm looking forward to doing this again in the not so distant future.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
Cheers.
Ciao.